So I was gone last week, and it was good to be home. It was really nice to come home to Charlotte. So I went to that place where I used to live, but this is home, so that was nice, a nice feeling to come home. And it spoke to me a little bit about this idea we want to look at today. As I said, of the Bible stories that we know, almost everybody knows the Prodigal Son. We've heard it in one way or another. We've heard it interpreted many different ways. And it's one of those timeless and eternal stories that speaks to who we are. It speaks to a journey. And as I said in my opening, what we begin to, when we start to understand the Bible from a metaphysical perspective, we begin to realize that these are all stories of consciousness. There's a lot of different layers of meaning in any good story. So there's levels of meaning, but there's a study that we would like to look at to help us understand how we engage in the world. That we are living, evolving, becoming, and some of us are like the younger son. We're anxious to get on with our lives. We've got it all figured out. I often say to new graduates as they're coming out of school of ministry, I remember so well graduating from the school of ministry, and I long for those days because I knew everything. And every day since then has been a lesson in how much I don't know. So I really kind of call back to that, right? So when we're living life, when we're evolving, we do some things right and we do some things wrong. But the message for us in this story, for me, is, well, there's many, but this idea about God's love. You see, fundamental principles that we understand in this way of thinking is that this universe is one of spiritual principle, that it is unfolding according to a divine intelligence, and we have many names for that divine intelligence. Choose one. I don't think the divine intelligence really cares, but and so we know there's a divine intelligence. There's something creative. There's something unfolding. There's something that delights in its expression. In the Judeo-Christian Bible, it opens with the story of God allowing life to happen through it by simply speaking the words of "let it be." Let there be light, and light happened, and creation began to occur. For me, that is the story of co-creation. That indeed, when we are in the midst of this divine intelligence, this spiritual principle, we are, as Kay said, co-creative beings. That there's a divine intelligence unfolding, and we are one with it, and yet we are not all that it is. And so when we are speaking our word of truth, or not truth for that matter, we are co-creating. We can say, let there be abundance, and abundance occurs. And we say, let there be lack, and lack occurs. What a cool universe. Once you figure that out, right? Once you figure that out, you can say, well, I'm going to stop saying let there be lack, because I've manifested this. Did that really well. Let there be struggle. Let there be strife. Let there be angst. Let there be upset. Let there be, I've got all that mastered. Now I think I'll let there be joy and harmony and peace and love. So in this wonderful story, the young man comes to the father and says, give me my inheritance. I'm ready to, I got this thing figured out. I've watched you run a little farm here, you got all this money. I can do that, right? Give me my money. I'm going to go create my own way. And so he does, because the father says yes. Because the universe says yes, doesn't it? Here you go. And so he goes off to a far country. He's young, got a lot of energy, got needs that need to be met, and it's got some cash in the pocket. So you can see where this goes. He engages in riotous living, having a ball. Party here, party there, meets some women. We won't label them, we'll just say women. Right? And so all of a sudden, he's like, ooh, I just spent all my money. Now what? I guess I'm going to have to get a job. Really, can you believe it? Right? Now, here's what I love about the symbology. I always like to look at kind of the underpinnings of this story. We remember that Jesus was a Jew, right? Rabbi, that's why they called him Rabbi. Just, a clue. And so in the context of this, it's helpful for me always to realize what's going on. So what's the job that this young Jewish man gets? Feeding pigs. Not clean. Right? So, in other words, he reached the lowest low. The worst possible place. In 12-step traditions, they talk about hitting bottom. Right? The people must come to a place of hitting their bottom. Now, the bottom is not a preordained space. Some people figure it out at a level and go, oh, this didn't work, I'm going to change. Some people lose everything. Some people don't ever want to change, right? Some people have not found their bottom yet. But in that tradition, they always say you hit bottom and then you begin the journey home. You must admit that you're powerless over the circumstance that you find yourself in and begin a new journey. Now, I know some of you longtime metaphysicians just had a little thing go off in your head like, we're not powerless, we're powerful. I get it, right? You are powerful. But just metaphorically and from an ego point of view, we have to realize that what we're doing is not working. I always like to remind myself and others sometimes that my best thinking got me here. Right? Because nobody sets out and goes, boy, how can I screw up my life today? What stupid decision could I possibly make that will really have ramifications for years and years to come? What would that be? I'll do that. Oh no, we think, aha, I know, I'll get even. Or whatever. So this young man says, I'm young. I'm full of life. I figured it out. I got some coin in the pocket. I'm going to go make life happen. And lo and behold, he finds himself feeding pigs. In fact, longing for even the food that the pigs are eating. He's so down. You see what I'm saying? He is telling us this is bad, folks. This is not a good story. And he comes to himself. He has this realization. Wait a minute. The servants in my Father's house are living a better life than I'm living. I'll go home. I will beg for forgiveness. I will prostrate myself in front of my Father and say, I'm so sorry, and I'll just be one of your servants. Because now he's learned a servant skill, right? But here's the beauty of the story. The Father sees him a long ways off and comes rushing to meet him. Yep. And he says, oh my goodness, this person, this son of mine who was lost has come home. Let us give him the best robe. Let us give him the golden ring. Let us kill the fatted calf and have a celebration, for my son who was lost is home. Hallelujah. Right? So hear this. When we turn to the universe, no matter what we've done, the universe turns to us. You see, the universe, luckily, does not hold grudges. Thank you for that. Right? You see, I had to evolve beyond an idea of a God that rewarded some and punished others. Right? Sometimes we are holding ourselves hostage to an idea, a mistake, a unskilled behavior. We are holding ourselves hostage because the inner longing within us said, go figure out your life, and you didn't have it figured out yet. Isn't that amazing? People say this to me sometimes. Well, Marty, if I only knew then what I know now, I would have blah, 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 blah. So I said, sure. And how the heck do you know now what you know? Because you were here, you made the mistake, you learned the lesson, hopefully. There's always that opportunity to learn it or not. Not start over, go back to the beginning, go back to the starting point, do not collect your $200, right? Until you say, aha, that doesn't work. Maybe I'll try something different. But you see, it takes humility to admit we have made a mistake. It takes humility to say, oh my goodness, maybe I don't know everything. And when we're willing to admit we don't know everything, everything becomes possible. Jesus stood in the presence of the divine, knowing his oneness. He used a terminology of the Father, of the power. I always like to translate as the power. For me, it makes more sense in today's world. And he says, of myself, I do nothing. But it is a power within me that does the work. You see, I've even known spiritual people, spiritual healers, spiritual, can I use this term, spiritual know-it-alls? Again, nobody in this room, and just, people I've known in far countries, right? Who are operating at this level, and they can recite back and forth Myrtle and Charles and all of the great teachers, and they know all these principles, and they want to question your consciousness, and you look at their life and you go, what's going on? Right? You see, it requires humility. In Course in Miracles, I think it's a wonderful teaching in that it teaches us the difference between our higher self, our divine self, and the ego self. You see, the ego self thinks it knows everything. It has a plan. It knows. It judges. It figures it all out. And then when we're operating from that level of ego, then we create challenges. So what I've discovered is when I create challenges in my life, there's nothing punishing me. Not God punishing me for making bad choices. The bad choice is punishing me because I live in a universe that always says yes, right? Not a power outside of myself punishing. It's just the natural, logical outcome of the choices we're making. And if I don't like the experience that I'm having now, perhaps it would be wise to make new choices. Just saying. I usually like to try and make the same mistake 2, 3, sometimes 4 times just to make sure. Just really want to prove this theory that this won't work, right? All right, I guess I'll surrender now and open up to the possibility. Why not? What else could be possible? The lesson for us in this story is this wonderful young man answers the call to adventure, as Joseph Campbell calls it. In the hero's journey, it talks about, this is a classic hero's journey story, about how when we move out of the known, it's usually either because of a divine discontent, there's something more for me. Most of you in this room fall in that category because you're in a unity church. You found yourself, you were in some other tradition and were like, not quite it. Doesn't make them wrong, it's just not quite it. There's something more for me. And maybe you went, as I did, down the path of riotous living to get here. We're not even going to tell that whole story. Someday, right? Because the funny thing for me is always that I knew there was something more, but I knew it didn't reside in church. There's an opinion for you. Been humbled many times by that idea. So sure enough, it was in church. It was just finding the right church. It was finding the right spiritual philosophy that matched with what I was feeling and sensing. It was finding the right philosophy said that here is a way, but it doesn't make the other ways wrong. It was a way that said all paths lead to the divine. And here's some tools, and here's some techniques, and here's some practices that you can remember who you are and live a greater life. So in coming to myself, we return home. We return to the Father. We return to the power. And the moment we return to the power, it says yes again. This story is a story of celebration. It is a story of taking that journey. In Joseph Campbell's work, when he talks about going on this spiritual journey and encountering the road of trials and ultimately coming across the supreme ordeal. For this young man, it's feeding pigs. But understand, whatever our supreme ordeal is, on the other side of it lies the gift. On the other side of it lies the awareness. On the other side of it lies the thing we've gone in search of. And when we find that, now we return to the world from which we came, but we are no longer the same person. Joseph Campbell talks, now we're the master of two worlds. In our spiritual human journey, we are on this journey and we start out and we either do spirituality really well and not humanness, or humanness really well and not spirituality, and something happens in our life that messes with that whole plan so that we might realize that we are spiritual human beings. And now when we return to the world, we're no longer returning as who we were, but rather as the master of two worlds. For me, this whole teaching, this whole philosophy, this whole way of being is about bringing our spirituality to the world. Living it day to day. Seeing love wherever we go. Bringing peace wherever we are. Recognizing the inherent good in all things. This is not an invitation to Pollyannism. I think we need to look at what's happening in the world. But we can transcend what's happening in the world and bring our light to it. Be not conformed to the ways of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Move into that state of being. So we want to follow our heart. And know that when we follow our heart, it may separate us. It may separate us from that which we love, that which provides security, that which provides certainty, that which provides safety. Well, it's like just on this adventure. I was just out to have a good time, and here I am shoveling pig poo, and, what? What happened? Right? It has separated me from my family. It has separated me from my known way of being. It may have separated me from my church. It may have separated me from my community. Temporarily. You see, only temporarily. Because in that willingness to follow our heart, to be separate from the old ways, we either reconcile or we recreate. For many of us in the room, we create new community. Right? Like with other people that are as odd as we are. That's why we get along so well. Right? Oh my goodness, I can't tell you how many people have come into our church over the years and said, I didn't know there's other people like me. I didn't know there was other people that thought the way I thought. I didn't know. And then there's a whole group of people that do that. This is cool. I always say, welcome to the compound. No, I don't say that. I never really say that. But the lesson for us is, to wherever we are on the path, is to realize we're never separate from Source. You see, there's another son, the good kid, the white sheep as opposed to the black sheep, who did all of the things he was supposed to do. Followed the rules, played the game, did all of the things he was supposed to do. And he's like, you're giving him the calf? I don't even get a goat. Now that doesn't sound like sibling rivalry, does it? Anybody have more than one kid? He got the leg out. They all have that voice, right? I'm sure that's how he said, he got the goat. Right? Think about our ego. Think about what happens to our ego when we watch other people have good show up in their life. And we've been working at it. We've been knowing the truth. By God, we're tithing. What's it going to take, right? And somebody else, some schmo, all of a sudden has this good, and we're like, well, that ain't right. Again, not people in this room. I just want you to have tools when you run into these people in the world so you know what to do. Right? See, isn't that our ego that wants to judge others' paths? Say, no, your path should look like mine. And the Father says to him, my son, you have always been with me. You see, you have always been with me. Jesus had a special place in his heart, as do I, for those who have gone off of the path, who appear to be lost, who appear to have life not working. And there were some in the community of the time saying that they should be punished for their errors. Sometimes in New Thought we're a little more cool about it, but we're still like, hey, your consciousness created, uncreated. Oh, thank you. I feel so much better. Really, really appreciate that compassionate moment. Thank you, really. Right? But you see, on these parables, you'll see this again and again. The one sheep that goes across from the flock, who would not go in search of that? The one coin that is lost in the house, the woman would light the candle and find the coin. And for those of us who have spent some time shoveling pig poo, as I like to say, there's a special appreciation in our heart for coming home. There is a realization of it, having gone through the darkness, to appreciate the light. You see, the truth is, in the divine presence, in the Father, the prodigal son was never separate. Neither was the stay-at-home son. And yet neither of them recognized it. Isn't that interesting? One did this and didn't recognize it. One stayed home and didn't recognize it. Set in judgment of the other. When the truth is, the Father says to us, all that I have is yours. It has always been. It will always be. But we must claim our inheritance. We must recognize that we live and move and have our very being in this divine presence. The key is humility. Not that old version of humility, which is really false humility, in my opinion. I'm unworthy, blah, blah, blah. No. It's just I'm stupid. And stupid in the context of that my best thinking got me here, and I thought it was a good idea. Right? I'm a brilliant person, but I still sometimes lay out plans and they come true, and I'm like, ooh, well, that wasn't good. Right? But here's what Jesus taught us. Of myself, I do nothing. But there is a power within me that does the work. All that I have, the Father is. And so when I can transcend my little, limited, egoic state and open into a divine intelligence, then I access a whole nother level of wisdom and insight and understanding, and it speaks to us often through our intuition. The more we're becoming evolved in that, we're recognizing there's different ways of thinking. There's logical thinking and there's intuitive knowing. They are both valuable. And ultimately, when those are balanced is where it's at. For me, I've come to lead with the intuition. I listen to that. So when the intuition says to me, you need to look at Unity of Charlotte, and I get over my twitchiness, and I'm like, no, God, because remember how I retired from ministry? Remember that? Remember how I told you that? Very clearly, very strong boundaries. And then I surrender, Sometimes it's a short amount of time, sometimes it's a long amount of time, but ultimately I'm like, okay, I've either committed my life to the divine or not. I'll go look at it. Did not make sense. It makes sense. In some ways. Still making sense, right? Still figured it out, but I think I'm supposed to be here. That wasn't meant to be an applause line, but I'll take it. Right? So when the higher self is calling us, we need to listen to that voice. We need to be willing to take that step. And the thing I hear more than anything is people say, I don't know how to do it. Well, of course you don't know how to do it, because you haven't done it. In the doing, you will learn. If I'd only known then what I know now, well, then get over there and start learning, right? Now you're here, and now you figure it out. So this is not about blind faith. This is not jumping off cliffs without, this is about listening to the intuitive guidance and following it. Saying yes. I say yes. And from that place of humility, that there is a power greater than I am at work. There is an intelligence greater than my ego self at work. There is a love greater than my personal preferences. There is an infinite intelligence that is working all of the time. My job is to keep opening, keep surrendering, keep being humble, so that I can access the greater possibility of who I am. So humility is the doorway, and it's the destination. If you become humble, you can make your way through anything and solve problems that may have seemed utterly impossible. You think you have to know the solution. I would say to you, you just need to know how to ask the question. Be willing, be humble, be open, be available, and all these things shall be revealed, and it is good. Let us pray. As we simply take this moment to connect with that divine source, that infinite intelligence, that divine wisdom, the 10,000 names we give it, God, being, source. And we open our hearts to the presence of unconditional love, our minds to divine wisdom, the very portal of our soul to knowing the truth of who we are. To realize that no matter where we are on our journey, we are never separate from Source. Life is always being life, in us, through us, and as us. So in that moment of coming to ourself and turning to return to Source, we know that Source is rushing through us to provide our highest good. What a joy it is to know that we are created in the image and likeness of the divine, that we have all of those qualities of spirit, of wholeness, of love, of joy, of abundance, of every good thing. And so in this moment, we announce and proclaim those for ourselves. We know we are abundant beings because we are one with the universal source and substance of all that is. So joyously we give, graciously we receive of the divine bounty. We know we are gifted beings because we are inhabitants of divine gifts. We know that there is a love that transcends all. And so we easily forgive and release that which no longer serves us. We choose to see through the eyes of love. We allow our lives to be healed and transformed through this infinite power. We know that wholeness is who we are, and that wholeness is expressing itself through every cell and every system of our physical, mental, emotional being. And that wholeness reflects itself in the world as vibrancy and vitality. How good it is to know this truth, to allow it to unfold through us. And so I just invite you in this moment, if there's a burden on your heart, be willing to place it on the altar of divine love. If it's no longer serving you, to release it and to be open and receptive to that greater wisdom and insight and intelligence, which will provide the perfect solution. Healing occurs. So we remember we are blessed. And because we are blessed, we extend our blessing. We bless this spiritual community, this divine idea we know as Unity of Charlotte. We know it unfolds perfectly, is abundantly supplied, is divinely guided. We extend our blessing to our brothers and sisters in our community, in our state, in our nation, and in our world. For in truth, we know there is only the brotherhood and sisterhood of all humanity. And as always, I bless all priests, rabbis, ministers, teachers of every faith. I honor and celebrate the many pathways to the divine. How good it is to know this truth. How good it is to live from the awareness of divine love flowing through us always. And so I release this word into the law. And through the power of the living Christ, I know it is so. As together we say, and so it is. Amen.